And so for those of you who are joining us from the waiting room, you'll see that we have 3 speakers here, but we have one speaker who is having some technical difficulties and is not going to be able to connect with us at this moment. We hope she will be able to at some point. So I'm just going to welcome everybody and then introduce our speakers. So ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Thank you all very much for joining us. We hope this hui is productive and helpful in the spirit of collegiality and helping each other to navigate our way through these new times. So welcome all. We'll use the chat for the Q&A, and we will hear from our 3, if not 4 speakers. Hopefully we will find Kate at some point, but at the moment we can't see her or hear her. So we're going to start with Sally Manuireva from MOTAT, then Lucinda Blackley-Jimson from Nelson Provincial Museum, Kate Woodall, who some of you will know from her time at both Te Papa and Auckland Museum, and Trent Yeo, who maybe you don't know so well, but who has been doing some great things in the tourism and the arts avenue. So that's it from me. I will stop sharing my screen and hand over to Sally Manuireva.
Oh. Well, kia ora Philippa and kia ora koutou. I'm ko Sally Manuireva ho. I'm presently acting GM for Museum Experience at the Museum of Transport and Technology, MOTAT, in Auckland. And nice to see so many people here to talk about innovations in public programming. I thought it would be really important for me to acknowledge my colleagues at MOTAT straight off, because I'm relatively new to the organisation as a member of the team, and they're absolutely the experts in their area. So I did ask for their input as in approaching this, and I'm really happy to connect if there are questions that's appropriate to go to colleagues afterwards. That's absolutely right. So I'm really going to talk about the overarching public offer, or the overarching public programme, because that's what I know most about. And what does that mean for MOTAT? It really means our events, our exhibitions, our digital experiences, ordinarily provision in other places, you know, outreach, which is most constrained at present, of course, and crucially all founded on a solid visitor welcome and experience, which I'll talk a little bit more about. It's interesting to think about the word innovation, and you know, innovation means different things to different organisations. I want to acknowledge that in different contexts. One organisation's innovation is not another organisation's, but innovation is a value of MOTAT's. It's about, for us, about being courageous and trying new things, and we've all been forced into that, regrettably, in different ways. This is enshrined in our, I'm just holding up our 5-year visitor experience plan, which I don't expect you to be able to read, but we recently finished work on this, and so helpfully it's a framework through which we're making all our decisions as much as possible, including decisions in this different era. I'm really looking for the opportunities. So when I think about the question that Philip's posed about innovation in public programme, for MOTAT it's really best described in 3 phases. So I might just talk through those 3 phases, and I'm happy to share my notes afterwards if people would find that helpful. And you'll recognise the phases, I'm sure. So the first phase has really been around a focus on reopening and those foundations of an outstanding visitor experience that we believe is really important. So for all of us, that is about providing a safe public experience, and that's actually really familiar. What we hear from our visitors in the time we've been open, it really is that they want stuff that feels familiar. They want to feel safe in the space here, and that's really vital. At MOTAT, the reopening of the experience is gradual. There are elements of the offer that we cannot currently present. It's not really safe to do so or viable to do so. So we're still in that phase of opening up the full offer. And, you know, that will become much more possible as we enter level 1, we hope. But interestingly, Philippa asked us to comment on visitor response. The visitor numbers in the period that we've been open, I think it's about 2 weeks now from memory, have been really encouraging. The numbers at the weekend over Queen's holiday, Queen's anniversary, sorry, the Queen, were on a par with last year, and the weather was better last year. This year we do have a reduced entry ticket price because we've got a reduced offer. But yeah, we had 700-800 people each day over the weekend, and that's really good. At this time we thought that was really good. People just want safe space to play and be social within a smaller group. That's what we were observing. And we do have a great exhibition that we were ready to open with Science Photographer of the Year. So that was really nice to be able to open with that as a fresh part of the public offer. And, you know, photography is always really engaging. So that was that sort of first phase that we're still in. And then the second phase is really about reviewing what's planned. And again, this will be familiar to everybody. But from talking to colleagues, it seems that the public programme as was envisaged, in reviewing it, falls into about 3 or 4 different categories. Some of it we've been able to bring forward because it's really appropriate, like the drive-in movies works great in this environment. Some things have been deferred because they're too high touch, too interactive, doesn't feel right. They'll still, we hope, appear in the forward programme, but not right now. Some things have been amended, you know, so like school holiday programme, it's been tweaked so it's more of a trail and people can stay in their smaller groups, but very strongly focused on discovering the collections, real fun. And some things we're continuing because they emerged during lockdown and they're really great, and that's where some of the innovation's been, especially for MOTAT in the digital space. With very quickly the organisation switched to creating MOTAT.fun, which was lots of great content online, and that audience has really responded well to that. So more of that will be a feature. We're also about to launch a new website, so those are really aligned. And then the third phase, which is where I think the opportunity for innovation truly lies. And this is where we're beginning to look in the more medium term at our public offer and saying what opportunities has this unlocked for us. And again, we go back to our visitor experience plan and say, what did we say we wanted to do in there that we could do more quickly? An example would be we really want to get the collections and the experience of MOTAT working every day. So there's always something happening when you're here that we absolutely want to accelerate now, for sure. I can say that we want to remain nimble and opportunistic, especially through our events and digital space. We will be focusing more on our audience and their needs and motivation, and we're just presently thinking about how we can quite quickly and nimbly gather feedback from audiences, and we're really interested to hear about how other organisations are doing that. I suspect that we'll be much more locally focused on our communities around MOTAT, and there's reasons for that, which I'm happy to talk more about, and that we should be anyway, but that's important. And finally, I think collaboration with other organisations is going to be a really big feature as we go forward with our public programme. It is anyway, it's part of MOTAT's toolkit, but you know, the MOTAT has great spaces, and there may be organisations that can't do what they would ordinarily do in their space, which becomes possible at MOTAT, and where we've got a purpose and aligned audience. The last thing I would say is, you know, the uncertainty continues for everybody on so many levels: economic, health, civic issues, you know, and it's hard to plan in uncertain times. One thing MOTAT really did well that I observed as I joined was they did a lot of scenario planning, like, you know, if it's like this, what will we do? And I think we'll continue doing that, because it really helps them be ready when scenarios played out. So that's how that'll be part of how we go forward, and looking for those the places where we can continue to innovate. So I hope that's helpful. I was just about on time, I think, Philippa. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. You mentioned the MOTAT fun, and I was really impressed with that during the lockdown period. I checked it out, and one of your educators was demonstrating how to make simple, fun paint at home from flour and water and food colouring and salt. And I thought that was just a really nice, simple, practical thing, because I know my neighbours who have 3 young children were really struggling during that time. Thank you. I'm going to hand over to Lucinda now.
Kia ora. Thank you, Philippa. And thank you, Sally. Just to introduce myself, I'm Lucinda Blackley-Jimson. I'm Chief Executive at Nelson Provincial Museum. I've been here for getting on for 5 years, and before that I was at MOTAT for a couple of years, which is a really exciting place, and it's going through a real regeneration and doing some really interesting stuff. So it's good to hear what's going on there. And I've also spent quite a bit of time at Te Papa and also Auckland Museum, so I've been around the sector for quite a long time now, probably well over 20 years. So yeah, a bit scary, but anyway, hopefully yeah, may have something useful to say or not, but we'll do our best. It's been, obviously, I think for all of us, it's been a very strange situation going into lockdown, and I think one of the things that we have found very much is that we are building houses on shifting sands. When we first went into lockdown, we thought, we don't know how long this is going to be going on. This could be 6 months. You know, we could be closed for that long. We may not have any physical visitors for all that time. And so we took a real sort of sidestep, I suppose, into working on digital offerings. And so the team really embraced that change and that opportunity and that potential that we had there in digital offerings. And you know, they all got really inspired to do things in different ways. So we had all the team fully involved in different initiatives, and we've educators were preparing content for Google Classrooms, which we've got on our website. Oh, not quite on our website, but up on Google Classrooms. Some fantastic resources that are going to be really useful going forward. We've started doing videos. We've taken the opportunity to refresh our website, and we're really getting into that mode of delivery. And then I guess everything changed again. You know, great news obviously from the government about the numbers of COVID, and so we reopened the museum, and it was a real challenge of how are we going to manage that process. And I'm sure that you've all been through that. How are we going to, what's our maximum number of people we let in? And we let our maximum's 100 people here, as what we think that we can deal with. Dealing with small groups, having limits of 10 people coming through. And so very much on first opening, we were really looking at that real physical level, taking away some of the high use interactives, how we deal with the Māori of the touchstones and cleaning protocols and all those things that we've been hearing about in these sessions. So they've been incredibly useful. And now it looks like we're changing and going into level 1. And so the house that we thought we'd built a couple of weeks ago is the foundations have changed again. And so potentially we're going to be in a whole new environment where we will be able to do events. We can have, we potentially next week, we won't have social distancing. People will be able to be close to each other again. And so it looks like we may well go back to where we were, which would be incredible. So when Philippa and Victoria approached me about this talk, what we thought about and how we respond in terms of public programming was, let's have a look at what we have been doing over summer, because we had a very big program to do with our Moon exhibition, and we thought, actually, that's going to be a really good model for what we're going to be wanting to do going forward. So I'm just going to take a little bit of a presentation here and show that. And so just bear with me while I organise screen sharing. Not sure what people can see there.
Yes, we can see the program. Whoops, it's just gone away.
Oh, sorry. Okay, we'll try again. Screen 2, let's try that. All right. Hopefully you can see the program. All right, I'll go back one slide. Here we go. So I do want to acknowledge my colleague Natalie Gilbert, who really put this program together. And I was hoping she was going to be able to talk through this today with us. She's our engagement leader, but she's on leave today, so it will be me. But I really do want to talk about how we go about putting a public program together. And this is the one that we've got for our Moon exhibition, which is actually going to be touring around New Zealand. It's going to Canterbury quite soon. We're able to hold it open a few weeks more after we've reopened, and then we'll be sending it off on its way. So I guess how we designed the program in the first place is really looking at audience segmentation. This is something that will be familiar to many of you in the audience, around those who, you know, from that museum perspective, that we on the assumption that people have different learning styles, that they want to learn in different ways, they engage in different ways, from hands-on to more intellectual to more physical engagement. And so we really looked at creating a program that's going to really engage with all those sort of different learning styles. So if you go through the program, we've got things like yoga, we've got singing, we've got reading, more music. I'll come back to that one a little bit later. There was cinema, there was lots of stuff for kids. There's fun things for kids, art things for kids, learning opportunities, there's STEAM-based things for kids, talks, and lots of different ways to connect with very many different audiences over a whole different way throughout the program. And these images are really representative of those different audience segments. Music, obviously, reading, yoga, lectures. So that was really sort of symbolic of the approach that we'd taken to breaking that up. Now, the other reason that we wanted to talk about our Moon events in this light, in terms of drawing audiences back in, was because we don't have a large marketing budget, and so we also expect our public programs to do double jobs, really, of helping out with the marketing as well. And so every event that we had was a reminder of the exhibition because everything was in front of the Moon. But we also worked with partners out in the community, and so not only was that great in terms of that sort of partnership development, but it was also really helpful for marketing, because they would put the word out on their websites and their Facebook as well. So they were really helping to generate the word of mouth and the buzz around the exhibition. And so that's what we're going to rely on, I suppose, going forward in this new environment, to get people inspired and to get people to want to be involved and to come in. So with that partnership approach, you see up here we've got yoga, the yoga studio sharing the posts. We've got the council, we've got the libraries who are also really involved, and we're doing quite a few collaborations with the public libraries at the moment, who are doing some really great And the other thing that this created was opportunities to get some media coverage too. And we were able to get a few good spikes in terms of visitation coming into the museum. And I think this is going to be important going forward to get a bit of media coverage, for people to realise that the museum's open, that we are welcoming people again, that things will be going back to normal. So these kind of things were really helpful. We had Breakfast News come in and do a little bit of a program with the Voice Collective, who's a group of a wonderful choir made of people who don't particularly like singing, but they get together and they sing in public, and they're really awesome. And so they came in and sang in front of the moon, so that was lovely. The local radio station ran a competition about get to renew your vows in front of the moon. So that happened as well, and the mayor came along and remarried some people. It was all fabulous. And we're getting the local papers involved. And why I'm mentioning the marketing and the media opportunities is just because I think it's going to be really important to try and emphasise that we are getting back to normal, that the museum's here, and to get that word out, because I think, as Sally was saying, people are really hungry to get back to normal. They want to be in a safe space, they want to connect, they want to get their families out, and to really be able to engage with the museum again. So that's the key, I think, to that. And that's really the end of the presentation that we had. I'll try and work out how to stop sharing. There we go. And I will pass over to the next person. Oh, I did also just want to say thanks to MOTAT for being so generous with your scenario planning information and that resource. We found it incredibly useful, so I just wanted to say thanks for sharing.
Ka pai. So it sounds as though Nelson Museum was kind of able to reinvigorate the programming in a way that really resonated with the local audiences particularly. So I'm going to hand over to Trent, who has had to do things completely differently. So Trent, perhaps if you just explain what Ziptrek used to do, what you've been doing now.
For sure, and thank you very much for an invitation. I appreciate speaking to a different audience here. Can you see what I'm showing you now? Can you see video? Yep, okay, cool. So I just thought it'd be useful to show you roughly what we do. We're in Queenstown. We are an adventure tourism business, zipline flying fox tourism, in groups of up to 10 people. We might have 30,000 guests a year, just to give you a sense of scale. But the premise and drive for this business is not just adventure. I love that, it's fun too, but the sustainability story. My background is architecture, interpretation guiding, outdoor and environmental education. My focus is to get people out into the outdoors, to give them a positive, meaningful experience that they can build a memory on, something to take home, because the most important part of travel is coming home. So what we had previously was a model which was basically a lot of internationals. I would say 80% international. Obviously we're Queenstown, we're located up at Skyline Gondola. It all's going rosy, and then the world stops. Something that we've always tried to do is consider what the other opportunities are, but the engine's never stopped to be able to do that. So let me just backtrack a second. I see there's three different opportunities for people right now. One is to think about product minus, what you can take away from your product to make it more accessible, easier, shorter, and all that stuff. The second element is product plus. Product plus is how do you add value to what your current offering is that's unique, different, and interesting, particularly for a different market, which leads me into, then you've got new product, which is the fun bit, and I'll talk about that in a moment. The other way to think about it is market minus, market plus, and new market. And I think we all need to be thinking about new market opportunities, because maybe the people you were talking to before are not the people that you want to have as you go forward further. Let me just try and stop sharing. I'm not sure how to, there we go. So market minus, market plus, and new market. So then we get into the new market. That's the fun bit. It's not always it's the risky bit, but the fun bit. So what we did was we instantaneously, in 3 weeks, we built a product which was built by locals for locals. And what I wanted to do is bring up the opportunities around tourism, but also bring alongside another hurt industry, area, which is arts, performance, and culture. Obviously, they're both hurting. If we can stand up, I would like to stand up together. With that, I also got massive interest, not only from the media, but also from our local communities, our musicians who haven't been playing for 8+ weeks. We ran an event over 2 days, which was completely sold out, probably the first event in New Zealand and therefore the world to sell out. And we ran music for New Zealand Music Month on every tree deck. As you went down, you heard a different artist playing something completely different. It was absolutely an experiment with so many pieces that could have gone wrong. We had masks and social distancing and contact tracing and highly complex operational things to deal with. We also rebuilt the back end of our whole system, our booking system, our payment system, our waiver system, all online now. So we are now digital everything so that the interface with people becomes faster, more efficient, and COVID friendly. So we basically did a whole lot of rebuild in one go. And my guys were kind of screaming at me a little bit, but also like, okay, we know that this is a move that's moving us forward and not making us ebb along with the natural flow of business and community coming back. Because probably your businesses, as is mine, won't survive if we do that. So I'm not interested in waiting along for the tide to rise. I'm sailing on a new mission. Now, what this does is open up a new opportunity just for a period. It doesn't open it up for all times, and it's on the offering list of what we could have. Let's say we have an extended menu now. But what it does is it has connected me very deeply with my community, which was an issue for tourism and still remains to be an issue. And we are now thinking about projected art, short film, spoken word, beatboxing. I don't really mind, but it leads to repeat visitation guests that are completely new, a sense of community and ownership, and a whole new business model for us. So this is one experiment. It was successful. We got TV1, TV3 News, New Zealand Herald coverage. And what I hope that it does now is sets us ready for a programming of possibility for spring when it gets warmer, because it's very cold right now here in the forest, for spring to actually curate a range of different events with different subject matter for repeat visitation. So I feel like it's one of only a handful of examples of like true pivoting, as opposed to market differentiation or discounting or new hours or all those other very important micro things. But I wanted to make sure that tourism was not thinking vertically, but horizontally in the way in which we move forward. Because the greatest value right now in New Zealand is New Zealanders working with each other. And I strongly believe that these conversations are important, but the most important conversations you will have is from people outside your sector. I would encourage you and offer to you our space as a venue for contextual display of the work that you are doing and or could be doing and or might move towards doing. And I would also challenge all tourism to create itself as a venue, because it's a very safe thing to do outdoor stuff in ventilated areas, etc. But it's also different, unique, and interesting. So since we have such amazing locations and places, what opportunities exist for you to break your bricks and mortar, which may have been the thing that's held you back in the past? Now, I'm not saying you guys haven't thought about this. You absolutely probably have. I'm also interested in what I consider to be super storytelling, which is why we're working on augmented reality overlays of your physical outdoor experience and other stuff like that, which I know museums are interested in. But that is a whole nother conversation. I just wanted to blast it down for you. I'm really interested in your questions, answers, discussions around this, because I'm really excited by the possibility. It was very successful from a community perspective, and therefore I think really important to do on the way forward.
Thank you, Trent. I've been just so impressed with your enthusiasm and energy for doing the whole pivot that you've managed. And I think what it does do is open up a lot of the ideas around collaboration across the different sectors. You mentioned, things like augmented reality, which museums have the expertise and the content, which could be taken to a whole lot of different locations quite easily. And I think that if we start thinking outside of just being museums and working with people who are into adventure and sustainability and all the other things which align with our values, there's huge opportunities, which is a really good moment to introduce Kate Woodall, who unfortunately is not on our video, but she is on the telephone. And Kate is in the museum world, but is now working with Doc in interpretation. So Kate, could you tell us a little bit about what you're up to?
Yes, I would like to add that I have put lipstick on, especially for this session, although you can't see it. So I do hail from the glam sector and now working for Doc. It's a reasonably new appointment. I am what they call the interpretation advisor, and this has a national remit. It is only me, so it's quite a big job, but nonetheless a really exciting job. And I guess I just coming in sort of towards the end, and I really do apologise for that. I'm going to blame it on being in Bluff, but that's probably unfair because actually technology has been really good so far. So I think it's something to do with the number of different systems that Doc is running at the moment. At least that's what I'm going to blame it on. So I am based out in the regions, but have a national focus, and that's a really admirable thing, I think, about Doc. It kind of has to do that, but it is really focused on ensuring that even its nationally focused staff are not just based in head office in the likes of Wellington, but actually out in the regions, which means that we do connect up with our local communities in a really meaningful way, like a lot of regional galleries and museums do, and obviously businesses. I've been really fortunate in that I came in at a time that we were piloting a storytelling ranger program, which is very much based on trying to engage and change behaviour, mostly with international tourism or tourists, and it's really about lessening the impact that we have on our conservation lands. That includes our natural parks, but also a lot of the heritage sites that are on the conservation land. And as many people will probably know already, there's been it's great to have people in these spaces, but there's impact that we need to manage, not just around feeding Kias, but it's also what we might want to do when we want to take a selfie photograph when we get too near to a precipice. So these storytelling rangers are people that we bring in just for the summer period at this point, and they are trained up. We do spend a lot of time working with them, training them up. Trent, I imagine you know a lot about this from your background. In fact, there's a number of similarities listening to your talk that I can like to talk to you more about. But we've done a lot of different kinds of training, a lot of in the field training, a lot of working with iwi who've worked with us to run training programs, and it's creating different stories. Now that's, when I arrived at DOC, I thought this was awesome, you know, wonderful opportunities. It's that personal engagement that can really help to transform people's behaviour, and it certainly is something that that we were seeing in the evaluation. This program runs until, in most cases, until the end of March. So, and it's in places like Franz Josef, Milford Sounds, Tiarnau, some of our big spots. So it was to run to the end of March, and obviously COVID interrupted that. So what we needed to do was kind of, okay, so what do we do with these people that are already working with us, but now can't go out in the field? And I guess what that downtime with COVID, there was, you know, kind of downtime with COVID, is that we actually had time to think. And I think that was probably one of the most important things for our little team working on this project, was time to think and time to sort of properly reevaluate what we were doing and how we were doing, and also think about, you know, what does this mean going forward? And like I think most people have probably indicated, you know, we're going to be looking at our local community that much more, and our domestic market. And DOC's been for a long time very focused on an international market. So, you know, we're probably not as nimble as some organisations. So I think we've needed COVID to kind of think, okay, how is it that we can better meet the needs of our local and domestic market? And it doesn't take a genius to work out that actually it's how we might tell some of these stories. It's how we bring people on this journey. It's how we might be thinking about what we do pre-visit, and also what we might do post-visit. Now, for a lot of galleries and museums, that you know all about that stuff, but for DOC, that's quite a new way of thinking. And I guess also what this downtime during the COVID period has enabled is actually us to do some desk research, to think outside the square, to look at beyond perhaps our usual sector, which has been very much tourism, which is great. But, you know, we've begun to look at other places, education, museums and galleries. And I think this is where that's really helped perhaps DOC for bringing people from outside of the normal region or the normal group that they pull staff on. So there's not just me, there's other people from, you know, education, small businesses now working within DOC who can help sort of foster these thinking. But obviously we're going outside and beyond our usual networks and getting people in. And we've had a lot of really great conversations from different organisations in the likes of Queenstown, sorry, not Queenstown, Queensland, and, you know, helping us to think differently and asking us questions around why we do what we do. And I think that's probably been really helpful, and it's been really helpful for those staff who were the storytelling rangers but have had to sort of do something different and begun to think about, you know, what they might do differently in their storytelling next year. And we've also kind of worked with them to work more closely with local, with mana whenua, and that's been really productive. And I think because we've, you know, even if it's going out and not so much storytelling, but getting to know iwi, we were, you know, in some areas we've been taking out care packages to different whānau, and, you know, we've begun to create a closer engagement, you know, something that speaks to the actual heart of kaitiakitanga, I think, and whanaungatanga. And I think that's perhaps beginning to bring DOC closer to some of the areas that we work in. I think I'll stop there because I don't have any slides to show you some actual things. So that's probably a good place to wrap up.
Thank you, Kate. Just to remind everybody, if you have questions, please use the chat function on Zoom to ask those questions. What I've been hearing is that this has brought some real positives to so many people, in both their connections with local communities and with other organisations that are in their neighbourhood, but also the opportunity to kind of zoom out and take a real hard look at what you're doing and why and who it's for and what the long-term effects are. So just going back to our other speakers, would anybody like to add to those aspects?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's spoken, haven't they, about the opportunity to take some time out to reflect and think, and that's so valuable. We rarely get that in an organisation. And I love the way that Trent and Kate talked especially about actually taking quite a different direction as a result of that, well, for different reasons, but yeah, that was really great to hear. I guess the challenge for us going forward is how do we make sure we keep that practice, you know, whatever the new normal is, that we still have time to have that reflection and review of things. Yeah, I don't have the answer to that though.
Thanks, Sally. Lucinda, you talked about working with the library, and you talked about people coming, kind of returning to the museum. Have you given thoughts to how things might really change in significant ways going forward?
Oh, that's a huge question, I think, Philippa, and in some ways we've been thinking of very little else, I guess, and it's I mean, there's that quote of "I hate to predict anything, especially the future," but there are real opportunities to collaborate, I think, that have really come out of this process. Like, we're working with the libraries on a Life in the Bubble collecting program around people's responses to COVID-19, to both the libraries, because we're the regional museum of Nelson and Tasman, so we're working with Tasman libraries and Nelson libraries in a big project. I think there's opportunities to, as the others were saying, to work in different spaces and in different ways, and far more collaboratively, I think. And really just identifying where each organisation really has a strength and how we can partner and work together in those ways. I think that's going to be ever more crucial going forward than it has been in the past.
Yeah, that seems to be a really positive development. There's a question here about interactives and high touch type experiences. Lucinda, do you have any of those that you've had to rethink?
Yeah, definitely, because I mean, one of the key platforms, I suppose, of the museum experience is hands-on learning, and that's one of the real points of difference that a museum can offer as opposed to other kinds of institutions. And so, yeah, you can come in, you can touch, and you can experience and hands-on learning and engage and do things and use a tellurian, which is one of the things we have there, or make models, or so many things that we offer in all the museums all over the country that are really important. And then it's been very confronting, and that's one of the first things that's called into questions. It's like, how safe is that now? Because normally we invite people to come in and touch and do an experience, and now we say, well, you can, but you have to, hand sanitizer, and don't touch that, and don't put your face too close to that. So that is really challenging, and that has certainly redirected us a lot more towards digital experiences and digital engagement. So it's not to say that we are wanting to leave that hands-on nature aside, obviously, because it's such a crucial way that people learn and engage with the world, and the real object is why the museum is here, really. So so that is really important. But certainly, and maybe it is over the next year, it will be that that pivot, I guess, towards digital experiences. And I guess we're looking at ways that those can be communal, I suppose, and not just individual in a headset, but really a communal experience too. Yeah,
there seems to be a big desire from all our audiences to get out and do things in a social environment without necessarily being too close together. Trent, you talked a wee bit about how your environment makes it very safe for people. Presumably you've had to institute a whole lot of more practical considerations like the hand sanitizer, etc. But on the other hand, your environment is something which kind of makes it special. But how do you then make it personal as well?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, part of knowledge, understanding, empathy is contextualization. And so for me, I don't really mind what the story is we talk about, but it has to be related to, you've got three pieces. One is you as a guide, two is the environment around you, and three is the person, right? So it's a triangle, and we have to connect those things together. If you connect those things together, then you have a potential for meaningful experience based on place, because this is placemaking. In terms of like the safety stuff, we had to wash every single harness. All our high touch zones are wiped every single time somebody comes through, et cetera, et cetera. Like it's crazy. But under level 1, I think that most of the world not exist. Not so sure, but like I think it'll just be contact tracing and other. And so I think that you guys are back in the game. In terms of like digitization and the opportunities around that, there's no reason why all of you couldn't have artifacts which are volumetrically 3D scanned and that are in the location at Ziptrek. So imagine having stuff from around the world, whatever the storyline is and the way you weave that in, and bringing that all together so I can see that on site. And now it could be like a vehicle, or it could be an artifact like a mower bone, or all that sort of stuff. But the way we'd like to put this together is to build that seam of experience, contextualize it in the environment, and build a story around it to make it all zip together. And so I'm really interested in the offer to you guys to say, okay, what can we bring out into that digital world, but digitally, into that contextualized environment, which is outdoor, which obviously in this case makes it very safe, but also makes the work that you have very much different in the way in which it's being presented. Imagine having a MOTAT, like Ziptrek brought to you by MOTAT, right? For a month, or whatever the case, right? Like it doesn't really even matter. The ideas are literally endless. So I'm interested in volumetric 3D. I'm interested in like, gaming engines that create environments for you guys, that put your work in environments. And if you haven't seen the Mandalorian Star Wars series, there's a making of the Mandalorian which talks about the volume. You guys should all have a volume in your gallery. And I know that's expensive, just to be clear. But for me, it's about contextualizing it and bringing it into a new way of seeing something that you could never get from not being there. And so once again, I kind of think this world is often limited, and I know because I came from the world of architecture, limited in the bricks and mortar. I think you have to make that disappear and think about the non-geographic, asynchronous things that can happen in your space that could be contextualized any way you want. So once again, the work that we do outside has a purpose in the outdoors, but the work that you guys do indoors has a purpose in a storyline as well. And whether it's a sustainability storyline, an engineering storyline, a human invention storyline, native species and endangered, blah, blah, blah. So I think there's lots of different ways in which you can wrap it up. It's just a question of the story. I'm not sure I totally answered that question.
That's a good answer, though. Just back to you briefly, Sally. You mentioned earlier that you had rearranged how you do things at MOTAT. You've got spaces. Are you bringing other organisations in? How are you kind of making the most of the different spaces and the ways that you can do things differently?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and a bit like Trent said, every single aspect of the MOTAT experience the team had to review completely. So the whole approach to managing the visitor experience has really changed so that it's safe for everyone. So we all can imagine what that is: extensive cleaning of many things. But in terms of space, we're definitely looking at how space could be used by others, and in particular, we've got one really large space, which we use a lot for our welcoming learning groups in and so forth, but really beginning to think about offering that out if others don't have a home, so to speak, for what they normally do, especially the performing arts. I do a lot of work in the performing arts, and that sector is just crushed at the moment. So, echoing what Trent said, that maybe that's the way we can collaborate. We are honestly beginning to look at that, having reopened safely. That's been a big emphasis. I think the area where we've done the things most differently has been online with motat.fun. The team are looking at gamifying the trail that we'll be doing around the site for the school holidays. So that's an innovation which should be really great. Watch this space, so to speak.
Thank you, Sally. Kate, I'm just wondering if you have some thoughts about how Doc, you talked about working with iwi, with local communities. Would you have some more to expand on that side of things, with perhaps with
I did lose you a bit there, Philippa, but I think I got it. Doc, and this is just it's not within my remit alone, as a lot of us thinking about this, is we all talk about wanting to do co-development. Doc talks about wanting to do co-development, and I think what probably COVID has done is actually make us think about how and what that really means within Doc. And I think what Doc is good at, and I've certainly seen that whilst I'm here, is actually they're very much, Doc is very much in the service of others. So, yes, it's always involved with emergency rescues and floods and stuff like this. And so it does that, it's geared up to do that in situations even like COVID, and that's where you get some true integrity happening there. And I think that's what, as someone who's worked in the GLAM sector, it can really see the value of how being in the regions really gains trust and relationship building, and you learn to rely, or you have to rely on each other in those communities. And I know that's what happened in Christchurch with the earthquake. So I think that's what Doc out in the regions, staff are really experiencing that, probably more so than they have for a while, about how they can meet the needs and work with others to achieve growing friendships, growing relationships, and growing partnerships, which may be along the lines of working together on a storytelling program. And I mean, that's something that's happened with Doc and a couple of iwi in the North Island, which is, sounding really exciting. And this is something that I think Doc is recognising as being one of those wonderful things that's come out of some real hardship.
Thanks, Kate. Yes. Now we're just about out of time. There's one last question about the whole kind of international versus national situation, where we've had to focus so much on domestic. We don't look as though we're going to have any international visitors for a good long time yet. Wonder if any of our speakers have any last words that they'd like to add about how that's influenced what you're doing. Lucinda?
I guess we have had to do quite a bit of reforecasting, and one of that part of that has been around visitor programming, around exhibitions. We had looked at doing getting, I suppose, what we, a really high visitation exhibition over summer, and that's in the Nelson Tasman region. That's our tourist season. And an exhibition that would appeal to those people, and we're very dependent, I guess, on that revenue. In re-looking at the new reality going forward, we're not going. Those people won't be here, so we're really having to re-look at our local market and what do they need, and really what do they want, and what do they want to see. And I think really focusing on engagement. Things for families, resources for families. We're also really conscious that the economy has taken quite a large hit. The tourism sector's obviously been hit hard. It's a big employer locally. So the reality is that there will be a lot of families out there who don't have very much money, and I think it's really important for the museum as a public good, I guess, to be providing those opportunities for free experiences, for our no charge experiences for people to come in, opportunities, I guess, to engage with local history. So we're probably looking at spending less, I guess, but we're looking at sort of more in-depth engagement and trying to have a real range of offerings, I think going forward, that are really going to appeal to local people, and particularly families.
Yes, that's something, Trent, you mentioned as well, that repeat visitors, which is perhaps something that Ziptrek hasn't looked at before, or hasn't been focused on before.
Yeah, no, definitely not been focused on. And I've always talked about it again and never really had a focus around it. Like, and particularly that deals with what I consider the peak experience, which is Ziptrek, and then the pre-experience, which is all the funnel of getting to you. But I think that you guys probably probably had more focus on the post-experience and how that leads to memory making or brand association and all that sort of other stuff. But I think there's a lot to be learnt about that, because if we expect them to come back, they ultimately need to love us. So one of the ideas that maybe helps with this idea is, I think about, if a business or organization was a person, what sort of person would it be? And therefore, would I want to hang out with them? Would they be fun? Would they be interesting? Would they be insightful? And all that sort of stuff. So I think that the repeat visitation story is really important. We are a brand that has quite a bit of support in the values in which we have. We're a zero carbon business. We're like full sustainability. Like, there's a whole lot of, I won't get into that stuff. So people love us, I would say, and people want to hang out with us as a person. But the question is what sort of person are you guys in supporting your communities? My challenge to throw to you is, if Kiwis can't travel, then what can you bring them in the world through a partnership with somebody else? Because they can't go anywhere else in the world anymore. And if you had a room that was dedicated to, I'd love to travel, but I can't, then imagine what they could do for you. And then as a return offer to that, you could open source this idea of this room. You could create a room of your artifacts or ideas to send to somewhere else in the world. And you have this whole reciprocal open galleries, museums thing where you all have a dedicated room to effectively teleport somebody to a new world. And another idea, and I can come up with lots of them, is just to refocus on Antarctica, because that has cultural stories, science stories, natural history stories, all that sort of stuff. And Antarctica is actually part of New Zealand. And you guys all know people who travel to Antarctica all the time because this is New Zealand. And that's a huge opportunity, which I think could absolutely be tapped. And if you could get that, because that's interesting for Kiwis, because we shouldn't be traveling there for carbon reasons anyway. But then when the international market opens again, there's no question internationals will be interested in that. Because there's a whole lot of resources that could be built around that. And then that could be an ongoing resource for you all. Once again, that doesn't apply to all of you, maybe, but there's some ideas for you.
Thanks, Trent. Now we've run out of time for today, but there's some just great ideas, and I think that we will explore them further as we continue to evolve and respond to our current situation and whatever happens next. And we will be having future hui, which are along similar kind of lines, which we're exploring what next is happening. One of the things you mentioned just then, Trent, was that high kind of post experience. There's been a lot of talk within the museum sector about audience impact and how to actually plan for that and then measure it so that we can show some of the value we're providing. We're also going to be looking at some of the digital opportunities in future hui and possibly something about no, I can't remember exactly what it was now, but we've got quite a few. So let us know what else you'd like to hear about. I want to thank all our 4 participants. Kate, I'm sorry we couldn't see you, but it was really nice of you to contribute. Thank you very much. I also want to thank everybody who's come along and been part of our hui today. And I hope you all stay well and stay safe. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Ka kite anō.
Oh, thank